We're visiting with PASL-Pro Commissioner Kevin Milliken as the Sockers and the California Cougars getting ready to do battle here in Stockton. Halfway point of the soccer season, great chance to catch up with the league commissioner. And first thing, Commissioner, let's discuss the situation that happened last Saturday in Cincinnati. The Kings played 15 players. They admitted to it. We've been waiting for a league ruling. Where are you standing? Where do you think we're at right now?
Well, I've already interviewed everybody. I'll probably give a final decision on Wednesday or Thursday. I know everybody immediately thinks, oh, it must be a forfeit, but there won't be a game forfeit. I think I did send that to your general manager last week. You know, part of the decision-making process is on that we actually don't have a ruling in our bylaws for this particular circumstance. The actual only rule we have is for an illegal substitution, which is just a blue card. So we have to have a fine line there. Also, nobody would have known that they did that except Cincinnati blew the whistle on themselves.
Right.
So Cincinnati was honest. The San Diego Soccer's organization was very cooperative and helped deriving at what kind of penalty would be, proper for this situation. Plus, there's been, I don't have any hard evidence, but there's been rumors that this happened one or two other times, and so do we go back now and retroact and penalize more there? So there's a lot of things leading to the decision. So there's going to be a suspension of some sort. I don't have the number of games yet. It's not going to be brutal because it's almost like, let's just say you have a 12-year-old son, and your son, if he gets in trouble and he lies to you, he knows he's grounded for a month. If he tells you the truth, he might have to skip the dance this weekend or something, so we're kind of in that situation where everybody was above board, honest, cooperative. We believe that it was just an honest mistake, which we'll correct with the new rule on extra players being on the bench in their attire, so obviously somebody in a collared shirt or something won't get tossed into the game. So we're going to do a few things like that and then have a penalty and then also come up with a hard, fast rule for it in the future.
Yeah, that was my next question: is how can this be avoided in the future? How can this not be for another team to look at it and go, okay, maybe if it's a tough game, we'll throw a couple of extra guys in. Our coach gets suspended. We'll pay for his bar tab.
Exactly, I agree with you on that, and so I haven't decided what the penalty will be in the future, but it's something I consult the teams on. I mean, I do have the authority to make rules, but we don't work well as a league if it's a dictatorship. So I take in everybody's information and make a decision what's best for the group. Some people are saying it should just be a forfeit. Should it or shouldn't be, I don't know. But if it's not that, it should be extremely harsh, like a month or some significant amount of time, because if there's only 13 dressed and only 13 on the roster and any extra players are in a collared shirt, then this shouldn't be an issue anyway. So if somebody breaks the rule from this point forward, it was obviously deliberate,
right?
And it should be a very severe penalty.
So the contention here is then that the Kings, because they had some guys that were there but they were dressed in their game jerseys, that they got in the flow of the game, and Rodas just lost count of how many people he put out on shift.
Basically. And it actually wasn't him. I think they had an injured player that he was attending to, and it was one of the assistant coaches that put the player in the game. He just grabbed him by the shirt and said, go in. And, poor kid probably wet his pants and ran out in the field, because he never played before, had not played very little. So it was a legitimate mistake, but shouldn't have been made in the first place. I'd actually had Tacoma call me 3 weeks earlier and say, hey, we want some of our reserve guys to get game experience, at least on the bench. Is that okay? And I said, well, there's nothing in the rules that say you can't have more than 13 on the bench. It just says 13 on the roster. So I said, make sure that they wear attire that is not game attire so they don't get put on the game in accident. I actually had that exact conversation with them. So that's the direction it needs to go. It just wasn't in our rules. It wasn't in our bylaws, so we need to create it and use this as a sample and move forward, just like the NFL has the tuck rule or whatever. We run into things as we go along, and we have to, come up with a new rule and make it a stern penalty. And we just don't have a rule or a penalty for the rule.
All right, let's switch to a different topic now. The PASL-Pro Finals and the pocket schedule that we printed in October or November, say Del Mar Fairgrounds. For 2010-2011, the Sockers had the best record in the regular season last year, which, and let me just start with a point of fact. Is that the PASL-Pro rule that the team with the best regular season record hosts the finals the next year?
Correct.
Okay, so that said, why are the finals in Cincinnati?
Well, that being said, the finals the year before that were in San Diego should have been in Cincinnati.
Right.
But we, the league, did not feel that Cincinnati's facility was up to par for what we wanted for our championship. And so we agreed to move it to San Diego, and Cincinnati agreed to forfeit that right. And they expected to have the finals returned to them this year. You know, there's obviously some gray area there because we switched the rule one year and switched the rule back. And we didn't say it was a hard, fast rule that it was going to be in Cincinnati this year because there are some other things that were in play. So one of my concerns, too, were that Cincinnati's attendance. I just didn't want to award it to them, you know, when their attendance had been so low in the bad building. We need to get some proving grounds from them as well. And they had to understand the cost of the finals, and I just, you know, think all that had to be understood. And, you know, we had the first finals out in Stockton, the second finals in San Diego, and eventually if we don't have something on the East Coast, we'd have a rebellion of some sort. You know, now that we've had the switch, we've now switched twice, and Cincinnati did accommodate, and again, the Sockers organization is very cooperative in understanding how, you know, the dynamic of all this works, and we actually have several new franchises we might be selling in the East. Definitely more ground there than we have on the West Coast. So, you know, we want to bring those teams to some games and highlight everything, get everything wrapped up by April 1st for next year so we can do a schedule early and everything else. So there's a lot of moving parts that fit into that decision. And but we'll go back to whoever has the best regular season record this year will host the finals, but we may have a vote since we're now getting so many teams in more professional arenas that the stipulation on that is it's played in a professional arena if they have to rent one for that weekend.
Right.
But we can't have our finals in a place that seats 800 people. It just doesn't make any sense. So.
Right. So just for clarity, Coach Salvaggio and the owner of the Sockers, Phil Salvaggio, acquiesced to this. This is for the sake of Sockers fans who aren't privy to any part of negotiation but might be watching the interview and going, okay, this was done. Was it yanked from the Sockers, or was this something that the Sockers agreed with the move?
No, we agreed with it, and what people may not know is that the way our league is set up, I'm not like a sole owner of the league. We have teams that are at higher levels than other teams. So some teams actually own part of the league, and some teams do not. And the Sockers happen to be an owner in the league, so it's in their best interest for the league to grow just as much as it is mine or anybody else, or even the teams that aren't owners in the league. Obviously, if you're an owner in the league, it's more of an interest for the league to grow. And just with the expansion that we're having, and you know, possible ownership groups and teams wanting to come to the league, it just made a lot of sense. And you know, Phil Salvaggio and the Sockers ownership group, you know, they understand the larger picture and what we're trying to achieve. And it wasn't an easy decision from a competitive standpoint. They want to be in San Diego. Right. You know, we're going to bring another event there too because there's been some stuff on the international front. So, you know, we got the Mexican teams are actually going to come play in San Diego the weekend before, plus a fourth international team that we're working on. So, you know, so they're still going to get an event, and if they go through the Open Cup, they'll host the Open Cup finals. So, so they'll get that too. So it's not like oh, you know, we'll just take it all away or whatever. So this is a very much thought out plan on what really needed to be done. All
right. So now you mentioned the Mexican team. So how does this move from San Diego to Cincinnati change the format of the playoffs? Will it be the same as last year? Will it be 2 Liga Mexicanas, a CMISL, and 3 PASLs?
No, it's going to just be the 3 PASLs and the Canadian champion.
Okay.
A lot of reasons went into that decision too. You know, the first 2 years, none of the teams really liked the 6-team format, so that was a problem. But if you expand to 8 teams, now all of a sudden you're renting building some more nights, and you have more hotel rooms. You have now you have the skyrocketing cost of the finals. that doesn't pencil out with ticket sales. So you're losing money on your championship, and the poor team that hosts gets clobbered. That doesn't make any sense. So most of the teams thought we should have a 4-team final format. At the same time, it was brought up, it's like, hey, you know, Tijuana pays their fees to Mexico, even though they really play in our league, but otherwise we don't play the Liga Mexicana teams. So why are they in the PASL final? Even though the CMISL is a separate league, we still have interleague play.
Right.
So it's like, you know, really the Mexican league, they're actually already done. They don't even play the same time of year we do. They already have their 2 teams done. So it seemed like that FIFA, our international governing body, should be creating another event, which could open up some room for maybe the MISL champion or, you know, teams from other countries to get involved that have leagues. You know, there's a good league in Ecuador right now. There's a new league in Honduras.
Right.
So a lot of these countries, so now we could actually have a Champions League final and almost like a kind of a European Championship kind of style event. And so just the timing seemed to be right to just say, yeah, you know, it's silly for us to have that format. It got us off the ground and made sense for the first 2 years, and now we need to split it up and get it down to a league championship and then our own international setup.
There's been discussion for that 3rd slot. Will that be the PASL wild card, or will a frontier team be put into the field?
Well, that depends too, because you know, we're monitoring how the season goes along, but it really depends how Cincinnati does, just like it did in the 6-team format. Because if Cincinnati wins their division, then we have to have a wild card playoff, which a frontier team would then be allowed in. If Cincinnati doesn't win their division, you know, then we have to have a new discussion, which kind of goofs things up a little bit because we have changed this format. But that's part of our league growing. You know, year after year, things are going to not be quite as set in concrete, and then it gets better as we go along. The frontier team should be allowed to play a playoff game to get into the finals against a team that should not be there otherwise, except for as a wild card. So we're going to have to see how the season plays out. We may make the Eastern Division champion, even if it's not Cincinnati, have to play a qualifying game. So against a frontier team.
Because I would imagine, I was trying to play this through the perspective of, take for example the Tacoma Stars. The Tacoma Stars could finish 13-3 this year and 2nd place in their division, having decimated Kitsap and Wenatchee over and over again, but lost to the Sockers 3 times.
Right.
And they could, in theory, be aced out of the playoffs by a team that they beat every time they played.
It could, if you buy into that theory. Kitsap's 4-1, and they beat the Cougars, who aren't having a great season, but the Cougars haven't gotten killed by anybody either. I think their worst loss is 3 goals. Yeah. So, you know, I think that originally the thought was, oh, wow, Kitsap and Wenatchee are going to be weak, and Kitsap's not weak. So they're not going to have, I don't believe Tacoma will sweep Kitsap. That's my opinion. And Wenatchee gets stronger as the year goes on. They've done that for like 4 straight years. You know, they get slaughtered in November and December, and then they're, you know, pushing teams to the limit at the end of the season, which why I don't know. Maybe it's they just start training camp late. I mean, who knows? I don't know why that is. You know, San Diego Chargers do that. So
a little too late this year, Kevin.
So yeah, I don't know why they do that, but Wenatchee's not going to roll over either. They played in the Premier Finals against Tacoma last year and pushed them to overtime. So, you know, what initially on paper seems like, well, we never thought Louisville would be in last place, and we never thought the Cougars would be in last place. You know, that's why we play the games. I mean, look at any professional league. You say, oh, they're going to win the division this year, and then they end up, you know, 6-10. You know, so you just don't know. And so, you know, the frontier teams have been proven to be, you know, pretty solid so far. You know, the Illinois PASL saw as a good team. You know, they lost a couple games last week, but they were good games. You know,
all right. So. Last major topic here, as we're talking with PASL-Pro Commissioner Kevin Milliken, status of the league and growth of the league. We were talking about a young league that's growing and getting better. The MISL is out there. It's a 5-team league. 3 of those teams expansion. 1 of those expansion teams owned and operated by one of the owners of the Big 2. There are many rumors that I've heard from multiple angles about the USL, trying to dip their toe into this and maybe even contacting teams in the PASL, MISL doing the same thing, trying to maybe grab some teams out of the PASL. Where does the league stand in terms of getting poached for teams? Where does the league stand in terms of perhaps seeking eventually an arrangement so that there could be one indoor soccer league?
Well, I haven't talked to the USL at all, so I don't know where they stand. I know they've called some of our teams, but from what my teams have told me, they're staying put. So I don't believe the USL is currently an option for any of our existing teams, unless I'm being directly lied to, which I don't believe is the case. The MISL we talked to quite a bit. I just got off the phone with their commissioner 2 weeks ago, and we're looking for ways where we could work together, whether it's the Open Cup or they could be part of the FIFA Championship thing that I mentioned already, or some other part. They even put the option on the table of doing some sort of promotion relegation system. So we're constantly talking with them all the time, and I don't believe that the MISL is trying to poach any of our teams, just like we are not trying to poach any of their teams. We have a respect there, and doesn't mean we're not fighting for new teams in the same market. It's just like Staples and Home Depot, or Staples and Office Depot, or fighting for customers in the same market, or whatever. We're competing businesses, but if they win the bid, it's congratulations. If we get the team, then it's congratulations to us. So we're both trying to grow the sport, and we have a pretty good working relationship with them. USL is a bit of an enigma. I mean, they've only announced one team, so I just don't really, know what they have, and we'll just see how that folds out. I just don't have that much information on it.
For the overall health of the sport of indoor soccer, just speaking as someone who covers the sporting world, whenever you get away in American sports from the big sports, from baseball and football and basketball and even hockey, take, for example, auto racing. Auto racing has a niche audience, but then when the IRL and kart split, they split their audience, and they wind up each hurting each other. Eventually, they got back together. Do you think that for indoor soccer to be viable, eventually it needs to be working towards a national league, or a league that has several regions but has a national aspect to it?
Well, I think you can have multiple indoor leagues, just like they have multiple outdoor leagues, but they have to be working maybe within an association framework together, at least, at minimum. And, again, more discussions to have with the MISL with that. There's a little bit of a issue here in the United States with that, and now it's going to become an issue in other countries. It actually got sorted out legally in Mexico. This might be a little too much information, but the bottom line is FIFA, outdoor soccer's governing body of soccer, sent Mexico a letter in 2006 saying they will not recognize or govern a sport of soccer with walls, period.
Okay.
So that is why we are not sanctioned by the United States Soccer Federation, and the US and the MISL also left the federation last year, because once we get outside the borders of the US, they can't do anything for us. And it's hard for us to play international matches, which is what we want to do. We want to grow the sport.
Right. So,
basically, we have to come up with our own association or federation, and right now the only league that's with FIFA, the international governing body that was started by the Mexicans, for our sport. PSL is the only league in that. The MISL is discussing joining that, and then if they did that, then we'd create a separate association in the U.S. for us to all participate in, because that would need to happen because now we both can't be represented. We have to have one representation. So, all those discussions are always going on and how we could do that, but I see that as being the direction eventually.